I love the way they smell, the way they look. I love the way they make you feel. I'm Renny Reynolds, and I'm passionate about flowers. When I was 8 years old, my neighbor showed me how to propagate a hibiscus cutting. When that little plant flowered, I thought it was the greatest thing I'd ever seen. After that, I studied landscape architecture at the University of Wisconsin. But I found I really wanted to have my hands in the soil and touching the flowers. So I opened a flower business in New York City. I had the opportunity of working with some of the best interior designers in homes across the country. But I really found that flowers were not being done the way I thought they should be, and I decided to change that. Since then, I've had the opportunity of creating social events across the country. I've designed state dinners in the White House for various presidents, and I've created some of the craziest parties in the wildest discotheques in New York City. In this video, I'm going to share with you some of my secrets for bringing flowers into your home and your life. I'll show you the trick of correct flower cutting and the secrets of choosing flowers at the florist shop. We'll visit a number of homes, contemporary, country style, and formal, exploring different ways flowers can add so much to the look and feel of a room. We'll look at casual and formal arrangements, and I'll explain why flowers which work well in one location simply aren't right in another. You'll discover that vases are just the beginning of a wide range of beautiful objects which can contain flowers. Using flowers effectively is easy and it's fun. The emphasis today is on a style of design which is much freer and less constructed than in times past. Don't be afraid to experiment. I hope by the end of this video that you'll feel comfortable with your ability to integrate flowers into your living space, and that you'll love what flowers do for every room in your home as much as I do. We're in the wholesale flower market this morning. New York is the port of entry for almost all European flowers. This is where florists come from around the entire metropolitan area of New York to buy flowers for their shops, and retail florists from across the country are sent flowers from this wholesale market. Now, a number of the flowers here are from Holland. For example, these wonderful nearing. Now, when florists come here to choose their flowers, there are a number of different tricks they use to make sure the flowers are extremely fresh. Notice the length of the stem on this nearing, so you can cut it at any number of points. You may want to do a small arrangement or something larger. Notice the firmness of these stems. They're not mushy. They've not been sitting in water a long time. They were fresh cut in Holland and flown here almost immediately. They're very solid. Now notice also the number of buds on the end of the stems of these flowers. These flowers will last a very long time. Now, here's some wonderful astilbe. A really great color that could be mixed with any number of other colors. Notice how fresh these flowers are by the wonderful condition of the foliage. Also, it's very fresh, it's not mushy, the stems are very firm. These flowers will last also a very long time. Now, one of the things of interest in the flower market is that there are plants and flowers being grown just for their texture. Texture is an extremely important part of the design of any flower arrangement. Notice here this bunch of Artemisia. I believe it's Artemisia Powys Castle, the cultivar. This will make a wonderful addition to any number of arrangements because of the gray color. Not a lot of foliage has this kind of gray color and the soft feeling, and also it's an herb, so it has a wonderful scent. So you're not only getting the great design color of this, the texture, but also the scent. So you're covering a number of areas with this particular plant material. It smells good, it has great texture, and wonderful color that not a lot of other plants will afford an arrangement. We also have a wonderful easily grown plant material here called sedum, sedum autumn joy. Now, this has very firm stems, and this type of plant material can really rot quite easily. That's the thing that we're most concerned about when looking for the freshness of flowers. But this has another very interesting texture to it. This could be used in a small arrangement with something like the nearine popping out of it, or any number of different ways this might be used. You'd of course want to, when you get it home, remove most of the foliage from the bottom so that again the water can be absorbed into the stems through those openings, and you would of course want to cut the stems on the diagonal. And this is another flower that's really a favorite of mine. It's called Lisianthus. It's a wonderful flower grown in Holland. And it comes in a number of different colors, all white, this sort of lavender purple color, and also in wonderful shades of pink. Now this is the single variety, and by that I mean it's a single layer of flower petals that will open on this flower. And I've just heard this morning an interesting item that these flowers are being hybridized so that we'll soon have doubles and triples, which will mean this will take on more of a rose effect. But you see the size of the petals here is quite interesting. And notice all of the buds on this. Now one of the things you're going to want to do with a flower like this is remove some of these flower buds as you're cleaning the flowers, so that all of the water that's absorbed by the stem of the flower can make the flowers that are already partially developed open fully and to their best. And again, these stems are quite fresh and they're packaged beautifully. Let's look at some other flowers. Here's a wonderful bunch of Dutch lilies called Sincero, a really terrific color. Pale pink, and these could be used in any number of arrangements and create a really subtle change of color with a lot of roses, for example. It's a really great color. There's a wonderful smell to these. Long stems so that you could use them in a tall arrangement or possibly a shorter arrangement. Lots of leaves here that you want to remove when you get the flowers home. And of course cutting the stems of the lilies and putting them in room temperature water. You'll really be amazed that very quickly after you put these in water, these lily buds will start to open and provide you with days of joy. Now, this is a flower that I really like a lot. It's quite unusual. It's referred to as fall crocus. Sometimes it's referred to as naked lady because the flowers come out of the ground without the leaves attached to them. But it's a wonderful, interesting flower and ends up being used for the texture of the top of the flower, and then when it's opened, it creates a great arrangement for a very contemporary look. Now, look at the rich color of these stalks. Really a wonderful flower that can be used in any number of ways. It comes in just about every color you can think of. Soft, pale peaches, wonderful, strong pinks, all white. It's a terrific flower, and it makes a great sort of support flower in any number of arrangements. These happen to be a wonderful, vivid color and could work very well in a very strong contemporary arrangement once again. Now the dahlias, wonderful flower, a full face flower that's quite interesting. Look at the different range of colors in these flowers. Their fullness and their color adds a lot to any arrangement. Now, this is a great flower, odd-looking thing, sometimes called brain flower. It's also called coxcomb. It's celosia. It comes in an interesting range of very deep colors. This rather vivid red, but also this great purple. One of the great things about celosia is also that you can use it as a dried flower. This flower dries wonderfully well, just as hydrangea does and a number of other things. And you can use it in its dried form in a lot of different ways. Now, we're coming to another favorite, which is larkspur. Another great summer flower. The height of this would be good for a large arrangement. You'd want to take off as much of the foliage on the bottom and any of these accessory sort of side shoots here to make sure that the main stem of the flower gets as much water as possible. Scabiosa, a really wonderful flower. This flower works extremely well, for example, in a large mixed English arrangement. The color is wonderful. It's a subtlety of a lavender that's quite great. You know, the Dutch are so clever in being able to grow these flowers almost all year round. It's a flower that's so versatile and really works well in just about any arrangement. Now you're going to want to remember to cut the stems on the diagonal when you get the flowers home. This is any flower that you buy from the florist shop, or even if you're in the garden cutting flowers. You want to cut the flowers on the diagonal so that there's as much surface space there for the water to be absorbed by the stem of the flower. This holds true no matter where you're getting the flower. You want to make sure that there's a fresh cut that's hitting the water as soon as possible. Now you're going to want to have the water be room temperature. You don't want freezing cold water unless perhaps it's sunflowers that you've just cut out of the garden, but basically you want room temperature water for the stem to go into when you get it home. Now it's a good idea not to keep flowers in the sunlight. That dries them out after they've been cut, and you also want to keep them in a room that's as cool as possible and of course as humid as possible. That'll extend the life of the flower so that you have them to enjoy longer. Now let's look at the way these flowers can be used to enhance our homes. This country-style living room is charming, but it tends to be dark. The windows are small and the colors are muted. Isn't it wonderful what flowers can do? They add romance and lightness and emphasis and create a cheerful mood. I like flowers to greet the eye as you enter a room. I chose these delphiniums because of their height and color, but also because there's a certain lightness to their shape. I like to use a lot of them for fullness and impact. These are country flowers that complement this country living room. And the blue color of the flowers reflects the wonderfully rich patina of the paneled walls. But you can get a similar effect from any other tall country flower. I even use wildflowers that are sometimes considered weeds, such as Queen Anne's lace or phlox or loosestrife. What we've created here is a simple look. The flowers are appropriate to the setting, yet the look is exciting, with naturally arching stems. Despite the low ceiling, these flowers work really well. They're like a giant exclamation mark, ensuring that they're the focal point of this room. Another interesting way to treat this focal area is with a large flowering plant. The balance of cut flowers and flowering plants in a room is extremely important. For one thing, a flowering plant is going to last longer than cut flowers, and also it keeps the room from seeming overloaded with flowers. Setting flowers in front of a mirror is a neat trick. It magnifies the scale of the flowers and gives a visual echo of the arrangement. I also like to combine candles with flowers. It creates elegance and drama. This arrangement is really an appropriate size for a console table. It's the only mixed arrangement we've used in this room. The flowers are still very country in feeling, yet more formal in front of the rather formal mirror. This whole setting, books, console table, lamp, and mirror, is often found in living rooms and entrance halls, dining rooms, and even bedrooms in traditional homes. Here we've used as a base flower the very full and abundant looking hydrangea. To it, we've added garden zinnias and cosmos shooting out of it to lighten the effect. The cosmos and zinnias also add color and a totally different form to the hydrangea. Don't you hate those huge arrangements that look like they belong on a casket instead of a mantelpiece? You know, the ones with masses of leatherleaf fern, spider mums, and gladiolas. Well, they're outdated and they really don't work for me. Simplicity is the point here, and the scale of the flowers in proportion to the mantel. Here I've used single stems of Casablanca and rubrum lilies in antique bottles that I found in a local flea market. It's simple and striking. This mantel is quite narrow, yet you can still get a very dramatic effect. A common mistake is to overpower a piece of furniture with flowers. This happens to be just right. It's a beautiful stem of hybrid lily, and it's in a beautiful little vase here so that it doesn't overpower this particular coffee table. But if we change and put this arrangement on the table, we find that it's just way too big for the size of the table. And also the flowers in this arrangement are much heavier than in the last one. Your guests wouldn't be able to see across this table, and it just wouldn't work very well. So we'll put the other arrangement back. Now when doing flowers around an individual room, think of the scale of the flowers, the scale of the furniture, and the totality of the room. We've had one large arrangement in this room of all one type of flowers, the delphiniums. We have the mixed arrangement that works very well on the console table and not on the coffee table, and this single individual stem of lily that works so well on this small coffee table. Think of the room as a whole. You don't want to overpower the room with flowers. You don't want your guests to start sneezing because there are so many flowers in the room. You want everything to feel just right. Now here's a neat trick to do with long-stem delphiniums. Delphinium stems are hollow, so a way to make them last longer is to pour water down these hollow stems and then fill the stem with cotton. A little bit will do it, just to hold the water in the stem so that they last longer. We're then going to add the stem of delphinium to this arrangement that Rick's working on. Now, what he's doing here is taking these stems of delphiniums, and it's the same method that you'd use if it was an arrangement half the size, for example, tulips. So don't be afraid to use flowers that have long stems like this, because it's really no different than using a smaller length flower. But what we're doing is crisscrossing these flowers in the vase to create a structure here that will hold all the stems that are then to follow. And you can move this around. For example, you'll be probably doing this in a kitchen or somewhere and moving it to the position where you want it. So if you create this kind of cross structure, not only is it prettier for the entire form of the arrangement, but it also makes it stronger so that the flowers will stay where you put them. This contemporary living room offers a very different kind of challenge. It's high, it's bright, and it's monochromatic. I use flowers differently in a room like this, but the process of analysis is really the same. When I look at a room, I look at its architectural features, the style and period of the furniture, how the room is used, and I think about the atmosphere I want to create, because the same room can look casual or formally elegant, romantic or cheery, and the flowers really help set the mood. Sometimes those of us who live in traditional homes tend to think of contemporary homes as being without personality or personal charm. That's really not the case, and I think this home is a really good example of that. Here we have some wonderful antique silver candlesticks that were in this person's family for a long time. And on these silver candlesticks, we've used the large-scale candles that give a real bulk to the feeling of the room. Everything in here has a very gutsy feeling to it. So we've taken these flowers, which are quite delicate, the yellow oncidium orchids, and picked up the colors in this Indian table that adds so much charm to the room also, and added to the oncidiums the ornithogalum flowers, quite wonderful for their drama and also repeating the color in the room of the white with a strong black center. Large leaves at the base of the arrangement give it sort of a base so that it has something to rest on, really. And then, because it is such a large room, we've used this large silver container filled with orchids. These are lavender vanda orchids and green dendrobium orchids. Now right there we're talking about a very different kind of flower. You don't see green dendrobium orchids all the time, and certainly these vandas are quite interesting. We've used these interesting colors because of the rather avant-garde tastes of this particular person. And the size of the arrangement works well for the really large size of the room. Now a contemporary room like this is really set up quite differently than a traditional home. In a room like this, there are areas where 6 people might sit or 2 people might sit, and you want to create spots where they feel comfortable. For example, the flowers make this area over here a very interesting place for 2 people to sit and have a conversation. This effect is really creating flowers all the way around the room. And I'll show you what I mean over here. This is a wonderful little grouping that's really enhanced by the addition of these flowers. A very dark purple dendrobium orchid. Again, a very offbeat color in flowers. And the entire sitting area here is really made more comfortable by having the flowers here, so that 2 people sitting here are again surrounded by flowers. Now, if I was going to be in this home by myself, I might be relaxing on the chaise. And over next to the chaise, there's a wonderful little, again, an antique silver cachepot with a very tiny little arrangement of yellow flowers. The really important point that we're talking about here is the creation of intimacy. In a large room like this that's very contemporary, it doesn't have some of the traditional elements of design that give warmth to a room, like draperies on the windows. Here we have windows open to the Manhattan skyline. We want to create points of intimacy throughout the room, places where a person can go alone and read a book and be surrounded by flowers and candles and those elements that are the warmer things in life, and really have a feeling of great warmth and graciousness. This is a wonderfully dramatic room, but without flowers it's really not ready for entertaining. Well, what a difference. When I'm planning the flowers for a dinner table, I look at all of the elements in the room besides just that dinner table. I look at the architectural elements in the room, what the colors are in the room, the interior design of the room, what type of furniture has been used, and then I choose the flowers accordingly to make sure that it's a really exciting table. For this particular table, I decided to use flowering plants in terracotta pots. Now, it might be that you're a grower of miniature cyclamens, such as these plants, or Phalaenopsis orchids. But whatever, we've used this design as a sort of a meandering path down the dining room table, rather than just featuring all the plants in the center of the table. This way, all of your guests will be able to have an interesting view of flowers throughout dinner. We've carried the design theme of this particular table around the room and added it to the mantel, where we've used the terracotta pots of miniature cyclamens mixed with the wonderful tall beeswax candles. This is another way of designing a tabletop, and one that I particularly love. I happen to call it table landscaping because that's really what it looks like. And what I like about this is that it's a very individual approach to creating a wonderful looking tabletop. It's not like receiving a centerpiece and just putting it right in the center of the table. Again, it stretches the eye all the way up and down the table. Now, what we've done here is used wonderful beaded fruit, part of a collection. This happens to be the watermelon and particularly humorous element, but you could really use any types of natural fruit in this arrangement. You could use seasonal fresh peaches and oranges, apples, pears, wonderful looking, very fresh fruit down the table. And then what we've done is use smilax vine. Now, this is tropical smilax vine, which I like using a lot. This is a vine that was used in Victorian times in almost all Victorian wedding bouquets because of its cascading nature. So we've nestled this among all the fruit here. We've of course put candles in because you can't have a party without candles. And then we're going to add flowers. Now, I've used a stem of Cymbidium orchids here, broken off one of the flowers, and we have water picks. Now, the water picks are available across the country, as is the smilax vine, in every flower shop, so you should have no problem finding them. We're going to insert the Cymbidium orchid in the water tube, and then nestle it in the smilax vine so that you don't see the water tube, but you do see the beautiful flower. And now we're ready for dinner. We've added the flowers, the Cymbidium orchids, the Casablanca lilies, and the wonderful white nerine, all grown in Holland. We've added some of these nerine in the candelabra, and we've used stephanotis and other flowers around to really make it look like a very natural setting here. To keep continuity with the table landscape, we've also landscaped this very dramatic mantel using the same materials, but using some larger candles in these really wonderful hurricanes. The candles are Italian pressed beeswax, and the hurricanes are 18th century reproductions of 17th century originals. There are any number of ways to do a table like this. You could use different color flowers than what I've used here. You could use different types of fruit than what I've used here. But it's really a matter of creating a table like this with your own personal things and your own personal creativity and skill. And when you invite your guests into a dinner after you've put the effort into a table like this, you'll have a great feeling, and so will they. If your house is anything like mine, one of the first places people come when you're having a party is the kitchen, whether you like it or not. One of the tricks that I've used is to make sure the kitchen looks as organized and clean as possible, but it also has to smell good. So here I've used an antique silver epergne filled with herbs, rosemary, parsley, basil, and thyme. So the kitchen really smells good. Any sweet-smelling herbs will work. Most supermarkets carry them these days. The kitchen can be a rather monochromatic room, so I like to add color. Here I've used a couple of bunches of Godetia, a wonderful flower. It has a lightness and a fun quality to it. It's a great color, and I've put it in a ceramic terracotta container that I brought back from a trip to Mexico. It's really nice to have flowers in the kitchen, just as you would in any other room in the house. Entertaining should be fun, not just for your guests, but also for you. One of the best hostesses I ever knew never set the same table twice. Now that's difficult, but you can do it also by bringing something personal to every table that you set. For example, here we've used an antique toy truck and we've filled it with zinnias to give a very cheery look to a summer luncheon. We've kept the color theme going with the same colors in the tablecloth, yellows and greens and blues and pinks, and in the napkins. Napkins are an important part of every table setting. Using flowers in objects like this truck is dramatic, but it's really quite simple to do. Now, we have lined this toy truck with vinyl garbage bag material, and we've taped it in with standard florist tape. This is particularly good tape to use because it's cloth and it holds the vinyl in extremely well. Now, after you've gotten this well secured, because you don't want water to leak out on the dining room table, you're going to add chopped oasis or ground up oasis. We've ground this up with our fingers, and we've soaked the oasis in water and crumbled it, and now we're going to fill this back end of this truck with the oasis. Now, there are several reasons for using this. It tends to not clog up the stem of the flower as a regular block of oasis might, and it still anchors the flowers just where you want them. This is particularly handy, for example, when using baskets, which are always used for flower arrangements. Here we would use a glass liner like this, fill it with the crumbled oasis, and then it would be a good anchor for the flowers. Now, we're going to work on this truck a bit and fill it with a really fun country flower, the zinnia, taking off the bottom stems of the leaves and tucking it in. Basically what we're doing here is laying the flower in the truck. Now notice that I've used these wonderful Japanese cutting scissors. Very sharp. That's very important when cutting any flowers. Now you can also use the standard flower knife, such as this one. Again, keeping in mind that the sharpness of the knife or the scissors is particularly important. So we would continue with this arrangement, cutting the stems. The container is, of course, filled with water and the oasis is wet, and we're basically layering in the zinnias all around to give a very full effect. And then what might be nice to add to this would be the coreopsis, for example, that we have here also. Because of the yellow tones in the truck, the yellow tones of the coreopsis are nice to bring that out. So we'll add a couple more of these, and you continue this until the top is covered. Sometimes you want a dressier look. That doesn't mean more difficult, just a different approach. Here I've created an elegant setting using phlox in tall, narrow vases resembling chemical beakers. And I've cut hibiscus blooms and placed them in low ramekins around the table to create the effect of flowers floating in a pool. The napkins approximate the color of the flowers, and these white ceramic napkin rings shaped like pigs continue the country feeling. I've chosen these huge dinner plates to match the scale of the table. And candles everywhere. I love candles. Candles overhead to give a glow to the room, and low candles to give a glow to the face. It's very flattering. You can never have too many candles. And silver and crystal are a wonderful addition to any dinner table. They sparkle with the glow of the candles, and they create a festive mood. Of course, you'll want to choose flowers which complement your own tableware and your own personality. Be original, and don't be afraid to take chances. There are no hard and fast rules about decorating with flowers. Flowers everywhere. What a great solution for solving the problem of a lot of hard edges in a very contemporary dining room. This table, which is trapezoidal in shape, really has about 8 sides to it. 4 of the sides are glass and 4 are out of this black granite. So we really want to soften the whole effect on this dining room table. We've done that with multiples, which is a really terrific way not only for a contemporary dining room but also for a traditional dining room. We've used these cylinders out of marble with glass rings at the top and put different types of really interesting orchids. These have vibrant colors of oranges and purples and reds, and the wonderful lavenders that are used in the napkin rings. Now this is a really neat trick. These are napkin ring bud vases. Clear glass You can use any number of different types of flowers in these. If, for example, this was a traditional setting, we might use ranunculus or miniature roses. Those wonderful little Italian miniature roses would look terrific in a little napkin ring like this. So it's a very versatile element and great for parties. You might want to include them in a party and have them as party favors for your guests to take home. Now, the way we've solved the issue of having flowers around this table, really encircling the entire table, but not overpowering it, is by the different heights of the different containers that we have here. The tall ones, then the medium-sized ones, and then these very low ones. And we have different heights in the flowers also with the use of these grasses coming up at different points. It all goes to make it a very interesting table and one that's a little bit offbeat. Selecting the container is every bit as important as selecting the flowers that you're going to use. It's very important to know what containers you have before you go out and buy the flowers. For example, here we've used these giant sunflowers with their very thick and wide stems in a tall cylinder, such as this one. It's extremely heavy glass, and that's important for something that's as heavy as these sunflowers are. And when there's water in it, it's even heavier, so you don't have the fear of this falling over. This type of cylinder and the size of cylinder is excellent also for things such as dogwood branches in the springtime, viburnum branches in the springtime, or forsythia. So it's extremely usable for a number of different types of plant material and flower material. We have the same type of vase, this lower cylinder, which works extremely well, for example, if you had a large bunch of tulips to put in a container. Here we've used the celosia or coxcomb. And what's interesting about glass is that you really don't want to get involved with using, for example, oasis or any number of other kinds of artifices when you're putting together this arrangement. What's beautiful about this is the way the stems of the flowers go into the glass cylinder. And here we have these stems looking extremely attractive because they're variegated with the red lines going through them. And that's really as nice to look at as the top part of the arrangement. And the entire form of this arrangement in the cylinder would look really pretty, for example, on a coffee table, a glass coffee table. It would be great, or any number of other places in the home. Now, there are other types of glass cylinders that I love to use. This one, for example, is the type of vase that I call a vase with a neck. It's wider at the bottom than it is at the top. You see it has a kind of neck up here at the top of the vase. Now, there's a whole realm of different type of vases like this. For example, this one, which is also a very versatile container. Now, with something like this, if you only had a few flowers to arrange in it, it would work very well because the neck is quite small. The base has quite a nice solidity to it because it's round, and once it's filled with water, it'll have good weight so that the flowers won't fall over. But this is excellent for just a few flowers. For example, we've used it here with these coreopsis. And look at how easy this has been, just really alternating the way the stems go into the vase, and it creates a very interesting look. Now, if you wanted to make a larger arrangement, we have this. And again, you don't have the problem with the flowers sliding around in something like this. If it was straight stemmed, you would have that problem, and you'll know that if you've tried this. So often this neck helps quite a lot. And what happens is, if you keep the sort of a collar of flowers around the top part of this vase, it looks very nice. You then don't have stems without any flowers. Another great container that we like to keep in stock here at the shop is this very wide-based glass vase. Now, it also has a nice size opening. This would be perfect for tulips or any number of other flowers. For example, the dwarf calla lilies would look excellent in this. Delphiniums would look very interesting in this. But again, you wouldn't want to have this too large. This would be excellent for something like a coffee table, or if there was a very large bedside table, something like that. It would work very well. Here are some more examples of these vases with a neck, as I call them, but they're really excellent, very classic forms in glass, and they work extremely well with any number of different flowers. For example, the height of this, which is approximately 8 inches, would be perfect with tulips in the springtime. It would be great with some longer stemmed hyacinths, for example. It's a very versatile vase, and I like to use these quite a lot. A taller one that works very well, again with a neck, is this one back here. And again, a very classic shape also. And this type of container would work for example, the taller delphiniums, lilac, forsythia, dogwood branches again. It's a different look in a vase from the tall cylinder, probably working very well in a traditional home. Now, the smaller, back to the more general workable scale, we have what looks like a standard goldfish bowl. In the business, we call this an ivy bowl. Now, we've used it here and filled it with one of my favorite flowers, lily of the valley. This is just about the nicest flower there is. We're used to seeing this in gardens across the country. It's just the best flower. We're now lucky to have it at all different times of year because the French and the Dutch are doing a beautiful job of growing it for us at different times. Now, look at how well this works in this very simple container. Lily of the valley in a container like this would make a great statement on a bedside table, for example, or in the bathroom where the scent would be really wonderful. Now, notice what happens when we take these same lily of the valley and use them in this wonderful antique silver container with a monogram on it. Now that would look terrific, for example, in a formal living room on a side table. It could also work in the right bedroom, or even, for example, on a small dining room table, a dark wood dining room table. This would make a beautiful little centerpiece. It's a very versatile flower, and this type of container is also very versatile. Now, before we get away from glass, I do want to point out these wonderful chemical beaker-shaped vases. These are extremely practical, and I love to use these in multiples because they come in all different sizes and heights. Some of them have square bottoms, and some of them are round, such as this one. But it works extremely well, for example, if you have a long dining room table and you want to use 3 of them, 5 of them, 7 of them. You can even use 9 or 12, depending upon the size of the table. Now, you might want to use art orchids coming out the top of them. You could use dendrobium orchids with a leaf of galax right at the top to create sort of a collar. It's a very versatile container, and one that I really enjoy using a lot. Now, finishing with the glass containers, we have a number of other types of things that flowers work well in. This is really an inexpensive cache bow. It comes with a top, so we take away the top, and this could work very well in a traditional home. There's a nice opening, and because of the shape of the container, it's extremely easy to arrange flowers in. Now, this could work well with, for example, hydrangea around the top in the fall season, with maybe aromaris stems or delphinium stems from Holland coming out of the top of that. So again, this type of thing works extremely well in a more traditional setting. Again, along traditional lines, always the wedding present, right? The silver trumpet vase, which I really love a lot. It happens to be one that was in my family, but I use this, for example, with lots of stems of lilies. Now, you might use Easter lilies in this, or the wonderful white Casablanca lilies. Calla lilies are something that would look great in this, or tuberose, and the wonderful scent of tuberose adds to any living room and adds to any party. For something more contemporary, these very interesting marble and glass cylinders would work well on a very contemporary dining room table. Or you might have this, for example, as a bedside arrangement. These could look really wonderful, again, with art orchids, or any type of really exotic flower would look great here. You might mass a bunch of Casablanca lily heads in this, and you might use this in multiples because it comes in different sizes. So that, again, staggering these down a dining room table with either the same type of flower in it or all different types of flowers, depending upon the color scheme of the party or the dinner, would work extremely well. Back to the classical, another favored container, and these have been copied for years, and for good reason. It's one of the best designs that exists, the very classic urn. Here it is in a small size, and these are available today. This is a new reproduction, and I think it's one of the most versatile containers that you can use. It would work well with just a plant in the center of it, for example, something like primrose. It's of smaller scale. Or you might do an arrangement of miniature flowers. It might be this high, or it might be a little bit larger and somewhat airier. But it's an extremely versatile type of container, and it is available in all different sizes. Now, this is sort of something we've done for fun here. It's an old farm bucket. It's basically baked enamel, blue baked enamel on metal with an old wooden handle, but we filled it with blue hydrangea of the same color tone, and I think it works extremely well. This would be great in a large country setting, for example. It would work very well in the living room or dining room of a barn, for example. So it's a very versatile flower, and it's used here in kind of a fun, sort of wacky, different container. Also, these ceramic pots I really like using. Now, this would, of course, be, again, in a more country setting. And here we've used it, a larger size of it, with viburnum berries. Again, something very different. It's not the type of regular thing you're going to find in a flower shop, but it's something that you might cut out of the garden. And it's here used as sort of a base flower, so that then the scabiosa in this wonderful rich lavender color, and the calla lilies, the miniature calla lilies, also in the same kind of color tone as the scabiosa, makes a really very nice arrangement. Now, we've talked about some of the more standard containers to use for flowers. Let's talk about something a little bit different. This is a bowl that can often be used for food. It looks more like a platter, really, than a container for flowers, but this time we're going to use it as a centerpiece. It's a very contemporary bowl, and we're going to use this interesting frog here. It also holds water, which is very important. It's called a pinholder or a frog in the florist vernacular. We'll put it in the center of the bowl, and then we're going to, here's some utensils so you can start on that. We're going to start with the large dark green leaves that might have come from either a hosta plant or something like a spathiphyllum. This arrangement could be used on a contemporary dining table or even a contemporary coffee table that might be quite large. It's going to take on a sort of Japanese look rather than the more European or American things that we've been looking at. We're using some interesting material here. This is a protea, actually, from South America, the yellow flower. And we're going to be using some yellow oncidium orchids to give some height to it. But the point is that it's going to have a very open feeling to it. It's not going to be the sort of tight and cascading and full arrangement that we've seen before. It's really going to take on a look of airiness and a contemporary quality. Now that Rick is putting the finishing touches on this arrangement, it still has a nice, light, airy quality about it. And you know, we've used all quality elements here, so that there is no reason at all to cover the frog with moss or to fill the bottom of this container with marbles, things that really don't add anything. You know, they're really inexpensive and they just don't add anything. The simplicity of all of this, even if you should see some of the frog or the metal container here, it doesn't make any difference because it's nice, it's solid, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. So we wouldn't want to add any of those elements to it, the moss or marbles, to really muck it up. Let's look at some of the arrangements that we've done in the shop today that are being sent out on orders. This one features hydrangea as the base flower once again, but we've added pale pink lilies and some wonderful pale peach roses in it. Also, there's a miniature calla lily that's in the same sort of lavender range, and we've used eupatorium, which has a wonderful darker sort of mauve color. One of the things that we pride ourselves on in our arrangements is the colors and the subtlety of the colors. I think there's a very sophisticated color palette here. These are being sent as gifts, and it's important that they have a broad, rather universal appeal. We love using hydrangea. It's really a wonderful flower to give a great sense of fullness and richness to any arrangement. And we've added the pale blue and the strong blue delphiniums here. We've also added the pale peach Vanessa roses and some grass at the top of the arrangement. To add a slightly different color tone, but to keep in line with the hydrangeas, we've added euphorbia in the pale yellow rather than the usual strong orange color. Overall, it takes on a very exotic look. The client that ordered this arrangement wanted something very dramatic and striking, so we used one of our chemical beaker-shaped vases, and we've put in it Casablanca lilies and some grasses. Now notice on this the perfect form of these Casablanca lilies. They're of course Dutch grown, and we've used some of these stems with some of the lily heads opening, but not all. Anytime you receive flowers, you want to make sure that you've got a long enough time to enjoy the flowers, and there are lots of buds on these stems for a long time of enjoyment. This particular arrangement was requested to be colorful. We've used some rather stronger yellow statice, some bright magenta cosmos, and some strong blue delphinium, with again the subtlety of the pale peach Vanessa roses in there. Wouldn't it be fun to receive this arrangement as a gift? And it's really versatile. It could go in just about any living room or next to a bed. Because of the sophistication of the colors, there are so many different colors used in this arrangement that it would work well in just about any setting. The wonderful lavender scabiosa, the sort of rich dark pink roses, the eupatorium that brings in our mauve colors again, the lilies, the grasses for a little gray effect and some lightning, and the white berries of viburnum. It's really an exquisite little arrangement. The living room, the dining room, even the kitchen. These are the rooms we tend to think of first when bringing flowers into our home. But the bedroom can also benefit from the graciousness and joy that flowers create. The dominant color in this room is pink, so we've chosen these cosmos for their color and their happy look, like bright, cheery faces. And the arrangement is just the right scale for this very small table. The larkspur is another charming country garden flower, and we've used it here by itself. It's perfect on its own. It gives romance to the room, and we can always use a little more romance. A bedside table is the obvious place for flowers, but it's not the only place. In this man's bedroom, we've chosen this very solid glass cylinder and filled it with late summer celosia or coxcomb and a few grasses for lightness. In choosing these flowers, we've also kept in mind the rich colors of the bedspread. Because of the somewhat reserved nature of this man's bedroom, a mass of one type of flower in a deep color makes a strong impact. It now becomes the focal point for the room, as well as for the person in the bed. In contrast to the mass of these flowers at the end of the bed, and for balance within the room, I like the sculptural quality of this single stem of Phalaenopsis orchid. The initial cost of an orchid like this is rather high, but keep in mind it lasts in flower for 4 to 6 weeks, and with some care, it'll bloom again next year. Centerpieces should never obstruct conversation. That means that a centerpiece should either be so low that you can see over it, or so tall that you can see through it. With this particular centerpiece, we've made it very tall so that you can see across the table, but we've also kept in mind the importance of the lower part of the centerpiece so that there's interest there. Now, you want to make sure that the space between 15 and 17 inches above a tabletop is always kept free, because that's the area in which there's eye contact. We're talking about a standard 30-inch table here, so 15 to 17 inches is the important area to make sure that you leave open. This centerpiece happens to work well in this particular room because we have a high ceiling here, and a tall centerpiece gives a really festive look to the scale above the table. So you have a really great feeling of party and entertaining when you see a tall centerpiece. Now, this is a very seasonal arrangement of fruit mixed in with flowers. We've used pears, apples, the wonderful miniature artichokes, the roses, hydrangeas, and some bittersweet, so that we have a wonderful melange of color. We even have some dried sunflowers here that are mixed in with the roses. And again, one of the design elements to keep in mind is the scale on the tabletop. Because we have a tall centerpiece here, we've used short candles. If we had used a tall candle, there would be too much interruption for the eye looking across this entire composition. This is what we call a standard topiary shape. That means a ball on top of a stem. We've used here an interesting birch stem, but you could really use this centerpiece idea in any number of different ways in all of the seasons. For example, it could be filled with fresh flowers in the springtime. You could use a lot of different elements that get across the seasonal freshness. And that's important when you're entertaining, to feel that everything's of the moment, not necessarily totally spontaneous. You want the feeling that it's been planned, but you want it to have a feeling of great freshness. The scent from this is also really wonderful. Notice the way the pattern of this linen tablecloth that also adds texture to the entire presentation. Notice the way this pattern relates to the overall design here. And the napkins that we've used at each place reflect the color of the roses. The graphic effect of the entire tabletop, including the way the napkins are folded, leading the eye to the centerpiece, all contribute to making this a really dramatic and exciting setting. Creating a topiary centerpiece is not really as difficult as it looks, particularly one of this size. So what we've done here, first we've taken a particularly heavy concrete pot. It's important that the pot is heavy because it has to hold all of the weight that you're going to put up at the top of the centerpiece. Next we've taken approximately 2-foot stem of birch. Now the thicker the birch tree you can use, the better, because it'll always look a little bit heftier. Now we've used plaster of Paris wrapped in the plastic vinyl garbage bag type material so that the plaster of Paris won't stick to the pot, so you can take it out easily and use it for something else in the future. Now we've anchored this very well into this pot so that this will not move and fall over. Next, for the top part of the topiary, we're using Oasis that's available in every florist shop across the country, and we've wrapped it in chicken wire. Next, we're going to take the Oasis and chicken wire combination and attach it to the birch tree. But first we have to put 2 nails in here to really hold it tightly. Next we take the Oasis and chicken wire combination and we put it on top of the birch tree. And the nails should hold it in position. Now, if you want a larger head on this topiary piece, you can use 2 pieces of Oasis and wire the entire thing with the chicken wire to the nails that you've attached there. It's a good idea to make sure that this is really solid so that nothing falls over. And it's important that the chicken wire is there so that we can have that to anchor the fruit to at a later time. Now here's one that we've started to work on. So we'll finish up on that. Let's get this one out of the way next so we have enough room. And we'll add some more fruit to this. Now what we've done is taken a fairly heavyweight florist wire and stuck it through the apples and the pears and the other heavier fruit. Then we're going to want to wire this to the structure that's already attached here to the framework. Next we're going to add a pear to balance it out next to the apple here. And we'll get the pear wired on very tightly. Now, of course, you could do this with any number of other different types of elements besides the fruit that we're using here on this particular centerpiece. Next, we're going to want to fill in different areas that are still showing the Oasis with pieces of hydrangea. And we've used a slightly smaller gauge florist wire to wire the hydrangea heads. This is a nice way to use up all those heads from hydrangeas that have fallen off from other projects with the long hydrangea. Now we'll add some more hydrangea. Now we've taken this lighter weight florist wire and stuck it right through the head of the hydrangea. These are dried heads, but they still have a wonderful look to them. And we'll wire this in, again filling in some of the other spots that are left open. We want to make sure it's tightly wired down because we want this to last. And you know what's wonderful about this is that it will last for several weeks as long as the fruit holds up. Next we'll add some bittersweet for the wonderful color that it has. It really represents fall in a great way. And I'm not sure that there are always wonderful ways to use it, but I think this is one of them. The texture of this looks wonderful with the tiny berries shooting off of these very sort of abstract stems. Okay, now we're going to add some more bittersweet, because it really adds so much to all of the texture of this, which is really an important part of it. And next we're going to move to the roses. For scale, I've decided to use 2 different types of roses here. This is a smaller bush rose with multiple heads on it that we've used in a water tube. We've used 2 stems of this smaller scale rose head and stuck them into the water tube. Then we're going to add this also to the centerpiece, pushing it down far enough to make sure that the water tube is not seen. So we want to make sure that that's stuck way back in here. And we've chosen a single rose with a nice big blossom on it so that that'll look great with the hydrangea. And we'll find a place where we can fit that water pick in. We want to have the background for the rose being as much the hydrangea as possible so that all these colors really blend together in a wonderful way. Okay, now you also might want to add some more bittersweet to this arrangement. One of the things I like about this is making it look almost as if it's growing. So by having this bittersweet coming down the stem of the birch trunk, it almost looks like it's a vine climbing up and around this stem. Now you don't want to obstruct the vision across the table once again, but having this sort of abstract form really adds a lot to the entire centerpiece. And we're going to cover the bottom of the pot and the top of the plaster of Paris with moss so that it again has a really earthy, wonderful, natural feeling. And you can of course add some more things to the top here if you want to continue the feeling on the top of the table. The roses, maybe there's an apple or two here, and maybe there's some more bittersweet sort of cascading down the side of the pot and across the top of the dining table. Sparkle and glamour. Who can't use more sparkle and glamour in their lives? Here we've used tall candles, 30 inches tall, with a short centerpiece in a clear glass bowl, a standard 16-inch fish bowl. And in the fish bowl we've used wonderful white flowers that contrast beautifully with the copper lame tablecloth. The 16-inch bowl sparkles wonderfully, as do the glass plates and the silver and glassware already on the table. The flowers are white Casablanca lilies, veronica, and white roses. Napkins are a really important part of every dinner table, and I'm a firm believer in an easy napkin fold. The napkin should be very dramatic. For example, this one, which gives a very festive feeling. This is one of the easiest napkin folds to do. We've taken the napkin, regular standard dinner-sized napkin, put our finger up through the middle of it, let it hang down a little bit, and then fold it over like this so that you have the body of the napkin coming down into the water glass. Then spend a couple of minutes fooling with it to make sure that all the napkin points are straight up. And you see what happens? It looks like a wonderful flower in the water glass. I love to mix the various colors of metals. For example, here we've used silver candlesticks, very short ones, with the copper lame tablecloth. But we could have also used gold or vermeil place plates or whatever mixed in with all of these different metals. And in the silver candlestick we've used a 30-inch candle, again adding a great deal of drama because of the height. And it won't block anybody's vision during a conversation because the height of the flame will be at 30 inches, well above eye level. The design principles that we use when creating table settings for private homes are really the same principles that are used when creating huge parties in large spaces across the country. I'd like to show you some of my favorites. This first party was the opening night of the New York Philharmonic. The party was in a tent in Lincoln Center and it had a deco theme. So I designed cloths that followed this deco theme. The vases we had made, and they're also in a very deco shape, but what's interesting about them is that despite the fact that there were something like 80 tables at this party, we tried to make the vases different. Some of them had gold leaf tops on them, others had silver leaf, and they had different shapes, but they all conformed to a deco feeling. We decided to use tropical flowers for these arrangements because they're quite dramatic, as you see here, the anthurium and the tall heliconia, and the wonderful shadows that are created on the ceiling. This is a rather elaborate engagement party that I had great fun doing in a large apartment in New York City. For this party, we had a buffet table, a very large buffet table in the dining room. We covered it with a white tablecloth. We then laid out huge silver trays where the food would be presented later. Around the silver trays, we draped smilax. To the smilax, we added gardenias, stephanotis, and other little white flowers. Then, around the smilax, we used silver vases that were filled with individual types of flowers. We had used mixed arrangements throughout the rest of the apartment, so on the dining room table, I really wanted the individual types of flowers to stand out. There's a vase full of roses, there's a vase full of white nerine, there's another one that's filled and overflowing with lily of the valley, creating a really wonderfully abundant look. This is a party at the National Academy of Design. It was a rather formal party, so we decided to use a very formal look. We made these topiaries out of roses and put them in gold urns, gold-leafed urns, which look really wonderful on the striped tablecloths. Because the party happened in different rooms, we've used the same theme throughout all the different rooms, but we've used different flowers. In this next photograph, you see paler color roses in a marble urn on top of tablecloths that have a much lighter feeling. This is a rather spectacular entrance hall that we've decorated for an anniversary celebration. First, we put in a really beautiful arrangement of flowers in this classic urn. We have lilacs and roses and lilies here, wonderful scents as you get off an elevator and enter into this party. But one of the fun elements here is balloons, and I really want to make the point that balloons can be used in an elegant way. When you use balloons, it doesn't just mean it's a child's party. Here we've used them very architecturally by using all white balloons on the ceiling and suspending from them streamers in white and silver ribbon. This creates a very elegant look, and really the balloons become just the method of hanging the streamers on the ceiling. This is a photograph of a detail of the tabletop of one of the most meticulous hostesses in the country. You see here the wonderful fold of the napkin, the perfect placement of the place card, and in the background you see the silver bulgari flower pot with the initials of the guest on it. The flower pot is filled with lavender sweet peas and was given as a party favor to the guest at the end of the evening. Here we've used a bunch of wonderful yellow wildflowers, and we've put them in a focal point position in the kitchen so that everybody that walks in will notice them and enjoy them. I also like to use flowers in the window. You might want to think of something like this: a hanging glass container with cut flowers and a wonderful begonia leaf. Every kitchen has its dark and awkward corner, and this contemporary kitchen is no exception. But we've solved the problem here by adding a really bright, cheery arrangement of yellow oncidium orchids and green dendrobium orchids. And the scale is just right for this room. If it had been any smaller, it would have been just too small and insignificant. So don't be afraid to really go big when you're doing an arrangement in a kitchen. Kitchens can often handle arrangements that are larger than what you might think. Beginnings and endings are important. It's nice to greet your guests and say goodbye to them with flowers. It's important to have flowers in the entrance hall or a foyer to set the tone of the evening's entertaining. We've used tall branches of crabapple, flowering crab in the fall season with the fruit on it, and we've used hydrangea, and to add some color we've added Casablanca lilies, also for their wonderful scent. You don't need to use an arrangement of this scale as long as you use flowers in the foyer. It's a real focal point for flowers. You could have a small arrangement here and it would do just the same thing, but the foyer is an important place, a focal point for flowers. Now we're going to take on something a little more challenging. We have a large formal living room that needs a more formal and mixed arrangement. So Rick's going to work on this arrangement here in a very formal vase. Rick's finishing up making a base of the hydrangea and adding the hydrangea without much foliage. We've removed just about all the foliage from these stems of garden hydrangea. And next we're going to move into adding the blackberry viburnum, which has a wonderful texture for this type of arrangement. Now, even though I've mentioned that this is going to be a formal arrangement, it's all of these textures that look like they're right out of nature that are so much more interesting for these 90s arrangements that we've been talking about. This kind of texture, the dark color of the viburnum blackberries, even the foliage on this is quite wonderful. Now, this foliage will hold up quite well. It's different than the foliage on some of the other flowers that we've talked about. This happens to hold up nicely in an arrangement because of the very woody stems on it. And next we're going to add the aromaris to the arrangement. This is a wonderful flower. It's often grown in American gardens, and it has this very long, spiky look to it, but it's got very delicate florets all the way up and down this part of the stem. And this is going to be the flower that determines the height of this arrangement. Next, we're going to add these beautiful Nicole roses. We're adding them because of the wonderful color. They're a deep burgundy, and as they open, the inside shows the wonderful pale, almost white, but it's really a cream color that's very soft and works beautifully. All of these colors are going to work beautifully in the room that the flower arrangement is going into. The other reason for adding the roses is that they're a totally different form and texture from the flowers we've already added. we refer to the roses as a type of face flower, which we don't have as yet in this arrangement. So you see we now have 4 completely different types of flowers in this arrangement, which adds interest to the entire thing. The next flower we're going to add to this arrangement is eupatorium. Now, eupatorium is also a common garden flower. It's so common, actually, its name is Joe Pyeweed, but it has a wonderful color and, again, a very interesting texture for this arrangement. So we're going to add these to kind of soften all the blueness that the hydrangea gives across, because, as I've mentioned, the room that this is going into has heavy overtones of reds and yellows. So we'll add the Joe Pyeweed in different places. And again, we are stripping off all of the foliage, or most of the foliage. The reason we do this is because the foliage will tend to die first, and the flowers will last longer. So what you want to do is not have to pull off the leaves on these flower stems later on. So if you take it off in advance, it also makes for a prettier, more florific arrangement. And after we get all of the Joe Pyeweed or eupatorium added to this arrangement, we're going to add euphorbia. Now, this is an interesting flower. It's a flower that grows on a succulent plant. Again, first we want to take off all of these leaves. And this stem of flower holds a very milky substance in it. It's often a good idea to wear rubber gloves when you're using it, because some people are quite allergic to this substance. But at any rate, you want to make sure, just as flowers that have water in the stem, that this particular stem of flower keeps as much of this fluid inside the stem as possible. So first we are taking off all these leaves, because they turn yellow really very quickly. And then we're going to bring a candle in, because we want to cut the stem of this euphorbia, again on the diagonal, and then we want to sear the ends of it. By searing it, we're holding in those white milky fluids. Now, there are a number of different types of flowers that you'd want to do this with. Anything that's a succulent or milkweed-related flower, you would want to do this with. Tweedia is another wonderful flower that adds to arrangements. It has a pale blue color, and it also has that sort of milkweed kind of substance inside it that you want to make sure stays in as long as possible. Now, the euphorbia are going to add a really rich finishing touch to this arrangement. The color is wonderful. It's a pale, pale yellow. It's not a strong and shocking yellow, and so it's different from the Aromaris in that sense. And it also has a really interesting form. That long, narrow look is quite helpful to softening, again, the weight and heaviness of the hydrangea. And here it is, the arrangement that we've been working on, in the room that it was made for. And the story of this room, the decoration and design story of this room, is really texture and color. The wonderful richness of the textures and colors in these chairs and sofas, the silk velvets that have been made in Italy. It all has a very Italian feeling. And the lampshade in silk, which is a very soft and subtle green, and the old gold tassels hanging from it, or fringe rather, hanging from it, and the soft hues of the wall. All of this is reflected in the arrangement that we've been working on. And the textures are excellent. Look at the way the Aromaris picks up the color tone in the wall. It all has a very luxe feeling, as if an Italian palazzo. And yet we've thrown it off a bit with the addition of a dendrobium orchid, almost 4 feet tall, in what looks like an antique Roman pot. It's really looking like something out of granite or stone and could have come from another century. All of this lends an air of luxe and comfort to an already comfortable room, but it's a finishing touch that makes all the difference. I think it's important to notice also in this arrangement that just because we've called this a formal arrangement, it doesn't mean that every flower has to be symmetrical with every other flower. Notice that there are a lot more euphorbia on the right side of the arrangement, and there are actually more roses kind of making a line down through the center of the arrangement on a diagonal. There are a few euphorbias off to the left, and then sort of a mass of hydrangeas also on the lower left, cascading out of the left side of the container. And there's also historical reference to this type of arrangement in the wonderful Flemish and Dutch paintings that get across the same kind of richness that all of these flowers bring to this room. I think this is a great example of how flowers correctly chosen in the right container can really augment and enhance the feeling and the mood of a room. Flowers are a wonderful way to add color, scent, and visual excitement to the way you live. They create a gracious and welcoming ambiance. But perhaps best of all, flowers used singly or in a huge arrangement make you feel happy. And because they're a relatively inexpensive luxury, you can experience the joy of flowers every day of your life.